Well, I went after Kelly as a biographer. I mean, as I say at the start, I thought I was closing on a murder mystery, and what I wanted to do was find a villain. Really, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to find a villain and for good to triumph. And that's what I wanted Dark Actors to do until I discovered the world was a more complicated place than that. And in my researches on Kelly, I took the approach of a biographer because I know if I went after him as a biographer, I couldn't lose him. I'm from South Wales. Kelly's from South Wales. If I went to the town where Kelly was born and spoke to his family, found where he went to school and built him up from there, I'd have it. Whereas if I started with the suicide and worked back, I would only be bringing with me my own prejudices and my own assumptions. So I went after him as a biographer, and I travelled to Pontypridd, and Pontypridd was a town I knew well anyway. I know the valleys anyway, and I went after him from there. The grammar school boy of 1950s Pontypridd, and I followed him. And he disappeared from view more than a few times, but I was always able to catch up with him a year or two down the line, and in doing that, a figure emerged. And the man that I found wasn't the man that made headlines in 2003. The man that I found was a self-contained, calculating, deliberate, cautious, expert man. A man of secrets, and a man who kept his secrets. Never spoke on a line once throughout his career. In fact, I don't think he gave an unauthorised interview in his entire life. I think even the interviews that landed him in hot water came with endorsement from the Secret Intelligence Service. And I'm not alone in that opinion. And when he burst into our living rooms during the Foreign Affairs Select Committee hearing, journalists and reporters wrote about how he was a beleaguered, bespectacled boffin, a disgruntled civil servant. He seemed meek, he seemed troubled, he mumbled. A man out of his depth in the jaws of Westminster. That's the Kelly that was sold to us in 2003. In actual fact, that Kelly was perhaps the most experienced interviewer in all of British intelligence, was Britain's foremost authority on biological weapons and had been since the Cold War, and had worked in hostile regimes for months on end, where he was followed, tailed, bugged. He'd worked with dangerous pathogens. He'd hammered vaccines into his arm day after day. He'd worn leaking suits at the threshold of Soviet laboratories. He'd been in routine contact with over 3 allied Western intelligence agencies, and he'd probably been the subject of investigations by 3 or 4 non-allied intelligence agencies. And he was a man who lived very much in the thick, very much in the thick of it. And to find that man, for a biographer to find your subject, to find a person that you can believe in rather than the person that just slipped in and out of your consciousness via abbreviated newspaper stories, but to actually find your subject is rewarding. And for me to set eyes on David Kelly as he really was, made the whole thing worthwhile.